Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the POK Podcast. Today, we are discussing everything CBD. So, CBD is short for cannabidiol. It is one of the compounds found in the cannabis plant and is often responsible for most of the therapeutic benefits that cannabis has. So, right off the bat, we're going to just be kind of upfront and say that we use CBD pretty regularly. And so, some of the information we're going to be talking about, we're going to be also including our own personal experiences with CBD and why we use it, what we use it for, what doses we use, etc. And we're also going to go over some of the empirical research that's being done, looking at the therapeutic benefits of CBD and also some of the limitations and restrictions around the research due to the legality status of marijuana. And so before we get into all that, just want to remind you guys, if you like what we're doing here at the POK Podcast, please subscribe. Don't subscribe. Please subscribe. Yeah, please subscribe. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you can go to our Patreon page and become a Patreon today, which will give you early access to all of our content each week. And we'll also be able to answer some of your specific questions here on the show. So with that being said, let's just jump right into it. So what is CBD and how does it work? So, like I said before, CBD is short for cannabidiol. It's one of the compounds found in the cannabis plant. Now, when most people talk about the negative experiences they've had smoking marijuana or using a marijuana-based product, it's most often due to the THC compound found in the marijuana plant as opposed to the CBD one. And THC is short for, and don't blame me if I mess this up, it's a long word, tetrahydrocannabinol. So,
no, I think you nailed it. I think that was good. I think you nailed it.
So THC is the psychoactive component in cannabis and is most often due to causes the negative side effects, the paranoia, the panic attacks. All of those negative experiences that are associated with marijuana are mostly due to the THC found in the plant. CBD doesn't have any psychoactive components. And it acts primarily on so it doesn't act with the central nervous system, and that's primarily why you don't get the psychoactive components. But it does work with something that's called the endocannabinoid system. And it's one of the most important components of your nervous system. So in recent years, CBD's been getting a lot of hype for its medicinal benefits. But even though it's been hitting the mainstream, it hasn't really been taking off the way you would think it would, with all the supporting research saying what a great and medicinal and therapeutic plant it is. And so we're going to go into a little bit about the physiology of it, the science of it, and how it affects your body. So to keep things as simple as possible, CBD is a cannabinoid. And cannabinoids are agonists. And think of agonists like keys to the lock, or keys to the door, and the door being the cannabinoid receptors. Now, these appear in your body naturally. And the cannabinoid CBD activates these receptors. And in many cases, the molecule for CBD is very similar to what's found in your body, and so it works very well with the receptors that you already have.
So the chemical compound of the cannabinoid is similar to that of the different chemical compounds that exist in your body.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so to back up a little bit and talk about what this endocannabinoid system does, it really is responsible for all your body's regulatory functions. So that can include your mood, memory, motor control, immune function, reproduction, pain perception, appetite, and sleep. And this system really has four primary purposes in your body. The first one is neuroprotection, so it's protecting your brain. The other one is stress recovery. So when you are experiencing a high level of stress, it's what helps bring you back down. Immune balance and homeostatic regulation. CBD is particularly unique because, like I said before, it being so similar to the chemical structure that's already in your body with the endocannabinoid system, it's very effective at triggering this system. And it's one of the reasons it's so good at being an antipsychotic. And we'll talk a little bit more about that function. But it's CBD more or less cancels out the psychoactive effects of THC.
So if you have, if there's a marijuana strand that has, let's say, a high THC and a low CBD, the low CBD is still going to take away some of the effect of the THC.
Yeah, and so when people have really bad experiences smoking marijuana, it's usually because the THC to CBD ratio is too high.
Okay.
There's too much THC and not enough CBD to cancel out some of those negative effects. And so it hyperstimulates your brain into this anxious state, and then you can't come back down from it.
Okay.
So because it activates this body regulatory system in the endocannabinoid part of your nervous system, it has a bunch of therapeutic effects. And most of the ones that we know about come from preclinical trials, so we have to take those with a bit of a grain of salt because they're not the most reliable empirical evidence. But there also have been some bigger studies that have gone through clinical trials that are up and coming in the community and are very promising. And so let's kind of go over those studies, and then we'll kind of touch base towards the end of it with what are all the ones that are all the benefits that we know of so far, including the preclinical trials. So I'm sure a lot of you, if you're watching this video and you're at all familiar with CBD, have probably heard of the girl who used the Charlotte's Web cannabis strand.
We watched a very long documentary on it.
Yeah, it was a CNN documentary.
It was like 4 hours altogether.
Yeah, and so one of the most viral discoveries of CBD was its effect on helping people recover from epilepsy and mitigating the amount of seizures they had per day. And now we actually have a decent body of research to back that up that does in fact suggest with some pretty strong empirical certainty that CBD does in fact help people with epilepsy in reducing their seizures, and sometimes it actually makes them go away altogether. And this was profound to me. I used to actually have epilepsy, and I used to have 50 to 60 seizures a day. And I went through all these different medications that had all these very terrible side effects.
Right.
And it took 2.5 years before I eventually was able to overcome my epilepsy. And at that point, we didn't even really know if it was because I grew out of it or if one of the trial and error medications actually worked.
I mean, we know several people that struggle with epilepsy. My father has a form of epilepsy. We have another friend who has a form of epilepsy. So what I really enjoyed about the Charlotte's Web documentary was it was completely based around these men who are trying to develop a super high CBD and incredibly low THC strand of marijuana. And they find throughout the documentary that these children who have tried countless medications and are having, almost hundreds of seizures a day.
That's incredibly dangerous when you're young because your brain's still developing.
Right.
One of the biggest concerns when I was younger was that I would turn into a vegetable because of how many seizures I was having a day.
Right.
That's not even really an exaggeration. That was really happening. It was becoming harder and harder to think, make decisions. It's extremely debilitating.
Well, and the CBD extract from Charlotte's Web was doing some amazing things for these children and getting them to a place where they could function and grow and be children. And I thought it was really impressive.
Absolutely. And if my parents knew about this when I was younger, if I knew about this when I was younger, it absolutely would have been one of the first things on our list of things to try to help me out. But back to the research bit, in May of 2017, the New England Journal of Medicine published an article revealing that CBD had successfully passed a stage 3 clinical trial. And what the stage 3 basically means is that they went through a double-blind randomized study. And that's really important because that's one of the highest tiers of evidence-based research that you can do that's free from bias, and it also eliminates the chance that a placebo effect is what's actually causing the medicinal benefits. And in the report, they stated that CBD had reduced the median number of seizures in their participants by up to 39% monthly. So each month they were having fewer and fewer seizures by up to 39%. That's incredible. And this is one of the biggest pieces of news around the CBD community to date because it was one of the largest and most successful clinical trials to date. And it's now what we are hoping is that doctors and physicians will catch on, and this might be just enough for them to start considering telling their patients, hey, have you looked into CBD yet? It's been shown to be really beneficial for epilepsy. And in addition to epilepsy, and partially it's because of the condition that's associated with epilepsy. So when you have epilepsy, it's because you're having these excessive firings of neurotransmitters in your brain. Your brain is basically hypersensitive to stimuli. So in addition, CBD has shown a lot of efficacy in mitigating some of the harmful effects or potentially hard to manage effects of autism. And now I want to be kind of careful here because we don't want to imply at all that there's anything wrong with being autistic, but there are some hard to manage symptoms, especially when it's dealing with this overstimulation of the brain it can be really hard, and particularly in social circumstances, to adjust. And so in 2017, another article was published by the National Academy of Sciences, and they show, now granted this is with mice studies, and so we're always kind of skeptical of animal studies, particularly with mice, because their metabolisms are so different, their body mass is so different.
Well, the issue with mice, right, is that they're very easy to do research on because they're so cheap, they're so easy to reproduce, and their DNA is like I think it's either 97 or 98% similar to ours. But as it turns out, that 2 to 3% is very, very important. There was a study done a while back where I believe it was a cancer treatment. I'll have to look into it. And it showed significant success in the mice that they were studying. Well, the treatment got approved for people, and they started running a trial on cancer patients, and then several of them almost died. Yeah. So I think that's an excellent example of, yes, it may be successful on mice, but that in no way means that it's going to be successful for humans. So take my studies with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and that being said, they found a great deal of evidence in the mice to suggest that this might actually be helpful for people that are struggling with the hard-to-manage symptoms of autism, and it was a very powerful treatment. But that being said, you never know how this is going to affect an actual human. Mm-hmm. But I would say, at least in this case, there might be some reason to think that at the very worst, you're not going to have the severe side effects.
Oh, absolutely not. And I think that if it's successful in mice, that definitely suggests that there's a chance that it will be successful in humans. But you can't say that, oh, well, it worked perfectly in mice, it's going to work perfectly in people.
Right. And then the same researchers that looked at CBD's effect on epilepsy and also autism had noticed that it helped mitigate symptoms of social anxiety, once again, in mice. But these are the only real clinical trials that we kind of have going right now. There have been plenty of preclinical trials, and we'll get to those. But again, if it worked in mice and it worked for a particular symptom, that is a good indicator that it might be worth looking into for human trials. And especially since the known side effects of CBD are so low. There's hardly any terrible side effects. There's actually no real terrible side effects. It's all very manageable things.
Mm-hmm. There are some side effects, though, right?
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get down past the benefits. And there's also been some evidence that suggests that it's also has these anti-tumoral effects, that it has these anti-cancer effects, that can actually kill cancer cells. There's been some preclinical trials that have looked at that and shown some efficacy. It's also a very well-known anti-inflammatory. This is a pretty widely accepted feature of CBD, is that it is a very powerful and a natural anti-inflammatory. So, and particularly when it comes to nerve pain, that is something that they found CBD to be particularly efficacious for. But what does the preclinical trial say about all this? So what are the plausibilities of what CBD can be used for? And so what they have found is that it's an antioxidant, a neuroprotectant, an anxiolytic, just means it has anti-anxiety properties, analgesic, which just means it relieves pain, and an antipsychotic, which means it can help reduce some of the overstimulation problems that happen in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Even from like emotional stress, right? Emotional trauma.
If you go to a lot of these distributors of CBD, one of the things they market is its anti-stress properties and reduction in stress. It's also been sold. Now, granted, it's not FDA approved yet for a lot of these, so it's not you can't be guaranteed what's actually in it.
Right.
But a lot of these products are researched by third parties and have been found to be safe generally. There hasn't been a lot of backlash on CBD, and that's one of the more important things, is even though it's not FDA approved, there's no horror stories that you can really cite that says CBD is going to cause a bunch of harm. And particularly from these reputable companies. But that being said, what are the potential side effects, and is it something that you really need to be looking out for if you think about potentially buying a CBD product? So, like I said before, most of the side effects associated with marijuana come from THC. But CBD does have a few other things that it can end up causing, things like dry mouth and drowsiness, and we'll get to the drowsiness bit and how that's affected more by dosage than anything else. So worst case scenario, if you take a bunch of CBD, don't drive a vehicle, don't operate heavy machinery. There's also been some evidence to say that extremely high doses of CBD can increase the tremors in people with Parkinson's disease, but the evidence of that is very few and far between. It can also lower blood pressure, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, but anytime you have something that lowers blood pressure, you run the risk of being lightheaded. And that is something that I can absolutely say from my personal experience has happened with CBD, but only in really high doses. And lastly, it can alter the body's hepatic drug metabolism.
What does that mean?
So that is the hepatic drug metabolism in your body is how does your body essentially digest and metabolize drugs.
Okay.
So if, for example, you were taking an antidepressant or another antipsychotic medication, if you also took it with CBD, there's the possibility that CBD could actually mitigate or alter the way that that drug functions in your body.
Oh, okay. So this is like the grapefruit thing, where if you eat grapefruit while you're taking Valium.
Yeah.
Fun fact, guys: if you are taking Valium, you are suggested to not eat grapefruit because there's a compound in the grapefruit that makes the Valium significantly less effective.
Yep, and you're going to get the same thing from CBD. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. So it could mean if you, for example, maybe a poor example, but if you were to smoke marijuana and say you got too much THC, you could take some CBD to try and counteract some of the negative effects of the THC. So that's just one possible application of it, and it's one of the reasons that we know about that effect is how it affects the hepatic metabolism in your body. And that's it. That's it for side effects. It's a fairly short list. And I like to joke about this because when you compare that list to what you would hear from any kind of standard pharmaceutical drug that you see on the TV,
God. The commercials
the
at the end,
the little like 30-second blurb about the side effects of taking this drug, for antidepressants, I think it's probably the most hilarious, right? May increase suicidal thoughts,
what?
Depression worsen, bloody diarrhea, sudden death syndrome. It just all these things just sound terrible relative to whatever it is that you were dealing with in the first place.
Exactly.
And in many cases, I feel like, and now this is my opinion, I feel like so many of these things, particularly with antidepressant medications, there are so many non-drug options, like therapy and particularly talk therapy, and just changing your diet in particular is another big thing.
Well, we're not saying people with verifiable mental disorders shouldn't take medication, but people with
sure, but it shouldn't be like your first go-to.
No, absolutely not. What is it? GAD, general anxiety depression disorder, something like that.
Yeah.
So medicine should not be your first go-to for that kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's so many harmful side effects, and there are often alternative solutions that have far fewer negative drawbacks. And for just changing your diet is one of the most simple things that people can do, but don't often do in those cases, and often turn to medications. And you look at ADHD medication too, and that's one of the most overprescribed things that in the U.S.
Well, now it's super abused too, right?
Yeah, and CBD might actually be a way of counteracting some of those effects as well if you're trying to wean yourself off of something like an ADHD medication. Now, don't take this as medical advice. I'm just saying the plausibility is out there because of the way it functions in your body. But what are some of the difficulties in actually researching CBD? And there are quite a few, but the biggest one is that marijuana is still illegal on the federal level. And that makes it so if you're in a state that it's not legal, you actually, if you're a researcher, you have to get deputized and get permission from the FDA to say, hey, yes, you can actually handle this drug and research it.
Well, it's considered a Schedule I drug, right? And just for reference, other Schedule I drugs include cocaine and heroin. So...
Yeah, you can see where this is going. And even if you are in a state that has it legalized, it doesn't necessarily mean it's super easy to research either. Most of the drug research that we have going on today is funded by pharmaceutical companies. And pharmaceutical companies have a monetary incentive in many cases to say,
keep
no,
weed illegal,
we don't want it to be legal because then it can be an alternative to many of the drugs that we produce and could be a hurt to our profits.
We're making so much money off Oxy, why would we let you make this legal?
Right? And then the other big limitation is, and this is related to the first one, is that we don't have a whole lot of double-blind randomized studies in the mix when it comes to these clinical trials. And part of it's because it's really expensive, which you need funding for, and that's limited. And then also getting participants is another really hard bit of this. Researchers will know this, and if you've done any kind of research study with human subjects, you know this to be a fact. It's hard to get a bunch of human participants, especially for a drug trial or any kind of substance trial. And it can often be expensive because then you have to offer them incentives to try and join the program.
I'll participate in a drug trial. I'll do it.
For CBD?
For CBD specifically. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'll participate.
But just keep that in mind. It's really hard to research. It's really hard to get participants for it. And there's got to be some more funding behind it. And one of the ways to make that happen might be to legalize marijuana on the federal level, or for more states to start legalizing it, and so it becomes a little bit easier for these researchers. And the official stance of the FDA is that they want to research this drug. But at the same time, that also would require a legalization of it for them to really start getting the ball rolling on this research and start pumping out publications and articles.
Well, and since it's still federally illegal, it causes a lot of problems in the states where it's technically legal, but sometimes the feds want to get involved because they're bored, and it causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do right now. Hopefully that'll change around because it has a lot of promise for having a ton of medicinal benefits. And speaking of its medicinal benefits, we're going to talk a little bit about how we use CBD, what doses we use for it, and how we actually ingest it, or the delivery method of choice for us. There are 4 main delivery methods. There are more than these 4 for CBD. One of the most popular and the most effective as far as getting it into your system as quickly as possible is actually vaping. And both of us have used CBD as in its vaping form. Mm-hmm. It is, for me, it's a fantastic product. We actually have a product here that's a vapor product. If you want to go hold that up for the camera, it's called Blue Moon Kush, and it's a CBD isolate, which means that it doesn't have any of the THC in it. It's entirely CBD, and they just throw in some vegetable glycerin into there, and then you can put it in a vaping device and vape it, and you feel the effects almost immediately. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of my preferred ways of taking CBD. It's been very helpful, especially when I've had some serious back pain. A while ago, I had some pretty bad anxiety problems, and when I had this, I was just able to take a quick hit off of a vape, and immediately it would help me start coming down from any kind of anxiety attacks that I was having. Another way to take it is through a water-soluble product, and so these are products that you can put in drinks. You can put in your coffee. That's probably my preferred method. I would say that's probably your preferred method, is to use the water-soluble.
Yeah, I don't put it in anything to drink, though. I've gotten in the habit of just, squirting it under my tongue. And
you can do that, too. It has kind of, most of these products kind of have, an earthy taste.
Yeah, that is one critique I would let everyone know about, is that it is very strong earthy taste. So if you are sensitive to taste, I would definitely recommend putting it in something like coffee that cuts the taste way down. I'm super used to it now. I kind of enjoy it now, so I don't have a problem with it.
I kind of do both. I put it in my morning coffee, and then we drink decaf at night because we're 87 years old. At night, I'll put it in some decaf coffee, and works for me just fine. I can also put it under my tongue. I don't really mind. It's just kind of if it's convenient or not. Mm-hmm. And the product that we actually have a water-soluble product with this here too. And this is
my favorite.
This is a fantastic product for a number of reasons. So it's by the company Hemp Lucid. They are no way sponsoring us. Keep that in mind. But they're a fantastic company, and their product is a little bit different from something like the vaping product that we had told you about, aside from it just being water-soluble.
Yeah.
You want to explain this part?
I like explaining this part, yeah.
Go ahead.
So Hemp Lucid is something that's called a full-spectrum CBD oil, whereas the Moon Kush is a CBD isolate. So the CBD isolate means that it just has CBD that has been extracted from the marijuana plant. It doesn't consist of any other cannabinoids from the marijuana plant. When you smoke something like Hemp Lucid that is full-spectrum, it actually does have a minuscule amount of THC in it. I think the legal limit is 0.03 percent. So when you still include the THC along with the other 80 cannabinoids that are found in the marijuana plant, there's something that happens called the entourage effect. So if you've seen the movie Entourage, you know that they're all kind of a group, right? And they work really well together, and they help each other out, and they beef each other up. Same thing is happening with a full-spectrum CBD, or within the marijuana plant also, I guess, is that when they are in the presence of the other cannabinoids from the plant, they are able to make each other stronger and more beneficial to your body. So when you use a product like the isolate, it's still good and the CBD is still beneficial. However, if you're using the full spectrum, it's better.
You're just going to feel the benefits. They're going to be a little bit more potent. They're going to be a little bit more faster acting. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of benefits to it. But I think it's important to disclose this bit as well, is that because a product like the hemp lucid bottle, like we had just showed you, does have some THC in it, and I've seen this happen before, it is possible to actually fail a drug test off of something like that. It's fairly rare, doesn't happen often, but it is a concern I think worth mentioning.
Absolutely.
If you want to consider using a product like that. Now, you won't get that with the CBD isolate.
Yeah, there's zero THC in the isolate.
You're not going to run the risk of failing a drug test there because CBD is legal, at least in our state. Mm-hmm. There are some states where it's not legal, so also keep that in mind of what your location is.
And it's only mostly legal in North Carolina. They like to mix up the rules and be annoying about it and, threaten to outlaw it, which is super annoying.
The store that we actually get a lot of these products from,
they've taken it off the shelf before.
We've seen them take it off the shelf one time because they weren't sure if they were about to get audited or something, or if they were going to have a stop by from the police. It was just like this big thing for a while.
Even though technically legal in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Just because it comes from marijuana. It's still under that Schedule 1 drug classification in a lot of states. And so it's important to make sure, your locations, your state's laws before you try and purchase something like this. And if you're interested in the products that we had shown you, we'll put a link to their websites in the
you can actually buy Hemp Lucid online. That's where I like it. And if you sign up for their email list, they send out coupons in their email list. And these products are kind of expensive. We will say that. So I think the biggest one I've ever gotten was 25% off. But 25% off, $80 is, I'll take it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk a little bit more prices here in a second. We'll get through these last two main delivery methods. The other one is oral ingestion. This could even include a water-soluble product as well. Oil products. There's also sublingual sprays that you can spray in your mouth, and it'll get absorbed through the cells in your mouth.
And you also have topical treatments.
And then you also have topical, which I think should probably be on this list of top 4 or main delivery methods, because there are plenty of people, at least that I know, like one of our best friends uses this as a topical treatment. And they have like body butters and massage oils that have CBD in it.
Especially if you have like knee injuries or you had a surgery or something like that, having that topical treatment helps with kind of localizing the treatment.
Yeah, you get the anti-inflammatory properties. It acts very much like a local anesthetic. It can very much help reduce pain, especially in the higher doses. And speaking of doses, and we'll talk about pricing in this section as well because they're very much related. So what we showed you right here is a 500 milligram bottle. So with the 500 milligram bottle, for most products, you're looking anywhere between $60 to $90, depending on where you are, what brand you're buying. And that's a pretty standard throughout most states. The CBD products are kind of expensive, and that's one of their biggest drawbacks right now. And that's also related to the fact that it's so hard to do research on them. It's so hard to actually get these isolates extracted from the marijuana plant.
Well, I'm sure it's hard for the companies, right, to navigate the sales format because of the legality.
Yep, and so keep that in mind. So we use a 500 milligram, the biggest dose that you can get as far as a CBD product. And there's bottles that go up to 2,000 milligrams, and those will run you a couple $100.
Yeah, that's going to run you like $200.
But it should be noted, if you are worried about taking too much CBD, let this be a little breath of fresh air for you. No one has ever overdosed on CBD. They've tested up to a 1,500 milligram dose in a day. 1,500 milligrams will knock you on your ass for sure, but it's not going to kill you. The worst case, if you take anything too much of anything, you're going to feel nauseous.
Hardcore nap.
Yeah, you're going to be napping for a while. Yeah. You probably won't be feeling too great. But you don't have to worry about something serious happening for the most part.
I.e., do not take a whole bottle in a day. Don't do it.
Besides, you don't want to be... That stuff is like liquid gold as far as what its value is.
Right.
Like chugging down $200 worth of CBD in a day. And that's...
I mean, I don't know what kind of life y'all live in, but we can't afford to do that.
No, we certainly cannot. So our best advice as far as what dose to take... It really depends on what you're trying to use it for. So we'll try and give you a little bit of some examples of what we've used it for and what doses we do for that. So when in the mornings, I use CBD primarily for anxiety. And I can say with relative certainty, it's absolutely reduced my anxiety. But I use a few drops of this. So maybe 4 or 5 drops in my cup of coffee in the morning. And I'm good for the rest of the day until I take it in the evenings. If you're using it for pain, you're probably going to want a higher dose. You might be looking at 8, 9 drops. or less, but this is a 500 milligram bottle. You can always get a 1500 milligram bottle and just take a couple drops.
Yeah, I would recommend starting with, but if you're new to CBD, I would recommend starting with the 250 or the 500 milligrams and taking a few drops, seeing how you feel. And then if you feel like you need more, take a few more drops. So definitely test yourself, give yourself kind of a gauge of what each thing does for you. And
in general, higher doses are for pain and sleep. Lower doses are more for focus and anti-anxiety properties. It can also help with diet. I've seen quite a few people buy CBD when they've been having eating disorders or they've been struggling with an eating disorder. CBD is great for getting your appetite back. If that's something you struggle with, it's also great for digestion. That's another thing.
But it's not going to make you hungry when you're not hungry.
Right.
So it helps promote the chemical compound that tells your brain that you're hungry, but it's not something like marijuana. You smoke it and you get the munchies.
Yeah, you're not going to get crazy.
That's not what it's like. No, it just helps promote that chemical compound that relays to your brain when your stomach is empty.
So pain, higher doses. Anxiety, if you're just trying to focus, if you just want to relax in the morning.
Just need a little bit of tension let gone.
Yeah, the lower doses are going to be optimal for you. Is there anything else that you want to add as far as how you use CBD maybe?
I mean, I definitely don't use CBD quite as much as you do, but my favorite use for it is I'm just kind of an anxious person and I'm pretty good at managing it, but sometimes the work I do gets a little overwhelming or like my never-ending to-do list gets a little overwhelming, so I use it for that. And then when we go on long car rides, is also when I use it. Yeah, because
this is probably I don't mean to interrupt you. This is probably my favorite application for CBD. So if you're making like a 2-hour plus drive, after the first hour and a half, your lower back starts hurting. You start getting a headache. Your shoulders start tensing up. This is a lifesaver. I cannot say enough about how much I've loved CBD for this purpose. Immediately, the lower back pain starts to dissipate. I don't feel as groggy. I'm still focused. So it's not, if you take it in small doses, you're not going to get that drowsiness effect that's going to make you fall asleep at the wheel or anything like that. But it's going to help relax the tension in your body. And it's fantastic for these long car drives. There's some car drives where I don't think I would have made it without the CBD. I would have had to take like 3 or 4 breaks and just say, you know what, I'll be an hour late.
Well, for me specifically, I was in a lot of car accidents when I was younger, and so I have a lot of anxiety associated with like being on interstates and being around a lot of cars going really fast. So especially if we're going to like Charlotte to see our friends or to Mooresville, I'll just take a couple drops of CBD in the car and just kind of relax and not get so quite worked up about being on the interstate and being uncomfortable.
In short, CBD has been fantastic for us. The real big disappointment is that there's just not as much research as we would like behind it, not enough research saying that this is a really strong medicinal product, because there's so many, with the opioid epidemic going on, with people turning to antidepressants, alcoholism, all of these different things to try and solve their problems, and in many cases a lot of people need that, but in most, I feel like there are so much healthier alternatives, and I think this product is just one way to turn the tide on especially the excessive drug use.
Absolutely.
Addiction. It's been shown to have some really great properties that can help combat addiction.
I mean, though, I think it's going to take some pushback against Big Pharma and saying that this is a good product. If you don't want to lose money, then invest in research into CBD, into marijuana.
Yeah.
Because this is way better for American citizens than, oxycodone or hydrocodone or, all of the drugs.
Well, and the irony is, and this is probably what we'll wrap up here today, is that people will believe anything is good for them, or in general. I'm not saying everybody, but the second a doctor says, take this, it's going to help, most people bite the bullet.
There's a level of trust you have.
There's a level of trust you have with physicians.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the hospital, I was having a bad panic attack, and I was prescribed Valium as the very first option. My immediate response was, well, have you thought about CBD? And the doctor had no idea what it was. Now, this isn't a hate on that particular doctor, but the fact that it's so unknown in the medical community is astonishing.
Well,
to
she
me.
was so fast to give you Valium, right?
Yeah, and it's as if I wasn't going to question it. And there's many Americans that don't have the medical literacy or the scientific literacy to ask the follow-up question of, like, what's going to happen if I take this? Am I going to, is there a risk of me becoming addicted? Is there some side effects I should know about? Should I not take this with a certain substance?
Well, and you hated it.
Oh gosh, it made me feel like an absolute zombie. And the very next day, I got myself a bottle of CBD and
Threw away the Valium.
threw away the Valium the next day.
We weren't taking that anymore.
It was a world of difference. I cannot say enough how much this product has helped change me. It's seriously life-changing for me. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to send us an email. You can make a comment in the section below. Hit that like button if you like what you saw today. Hit that subscribe button so you'll keep up with all of our content. And remember, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to our Patreon page and become a patron today, in which you will get access to early content.
We'll put that in the description down below.
Absolutely. And you guys have a great rest of your week, and thanks for joining us on the POK Podcast. See you next time, guys.
Bye.